Test.
Two-thirds vote, give you a little cheat sheet there.
Hey, Dave, you guys want to test the video from the laptop?
warm, that'll reverse itself. Yeah. I flew from Chicago to Florida, and it was 5 degrees when I left Chicago. It was 75 when I got to Florida. What am I doing wrong?
Okay, so we have to open up the presentation.
Yes.
Oh, preventative. There they are right there.
Hey, Susan, how are you?
Laser pointer. That just wax it. So that's got to do that. About 150 feet.
Right.
Oh, that's check in. I meant to say that the I'm gonna need to use my cheat sheet on a couple of these things. So test the sound. All right, thank you. So, sorry. That's why they call it a special town meeting. Right, and if I click this, I just want to be sure.
grins back. How are you?
Apparently it does. All right. Thank you very much. Just finding.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to mention the day at the races, but I can mention the 27th too.
March 27th, all locations for the polls.
Yep. Okay. Hey.
That is Bob McIntosh with the glasses.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great.
He's on the Commissioner of Trust.
Hey, Susan. The town meeting will come to order, and the members will please take their seats. We will start our meeting as we always do by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance on this snowy evening. A few remarks and announcements as we begin. I wanted to take a moment to remember Deanne Stryker, who we lost recently as a community. I'm of the firm belief that grief is something that is private and not public and should not be used in the service of television broadcasts or newspaper sales. But in a very real sense, Deanne's loss was a loss for all of us, in that she lived out all of the very values that we try and inculcate in our children in our community. A good student, a good family member, a good library user, a good citizen, a good friend. Everything that we could want as a member of our community. It seems by now that we should have learned the lesson that we cannot control the events that overtake us, but it seems to be something that we need to relearn every time. Just about 50 years ago tonight, in April of 1968, on a street corner in Indianapolis, there was a small bit of Greek verse that was popularized. It was part of the Greek trilogy Orestia, authored by Aeschylus, and the lines that were recited that became known to many were these: "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." We are tonight very close to despair still, and very far from wisdom. We pause for a moment of silence to remember Deanne. Thank you. The Planning Board has an announcement this evening that they would like to call your attention to. Last spring, the town meeting appropriated $75,000 for the Planning Board to develop a comprehensive master plan. The Planning Board has formed a master plan steering committee. The members include town meeting members from each precinct and the Planning Board, and they have met regularly. The master plan steering committee is developing an online survey to obtain views and comments from residents and property owners about topics the master plan will include, such as land use, housing, open space and recreation, economic development, natural and cultural resources, and transportation. The Master Plan Steering Committee encourages everyone to take a few short minutes to participate in the online survey, which will go live in early April on the town website. All of Winchester, including, of course, town meeting members, are invited to a kickoff event for the survey on Saturday, April 7th. The time and location will be advertised. Please visit the Planning Board section of the town website for updated information about the survey in the coming weeks, and please plan to take the survey in early April. The Planning Board very much appreciates your attention in this regard. Planning Board survey meeting on Saturday, April 7th. Additionally, Mr. Howley has asked that I call your attention to the fact that he and the other members of the town government would appreciate your attendance at the Board of Selectmen meeting this Monday night, March 12th at 7:40 p.m., in which the town seeks to solicit input from town meeting members and all citizens on the selection process for the new town meeting, for the new town manager. Mr. Howard, if you have not heard, has announced his resignation. We will not be able to replace him, but we will find somebody to hold his title. So this Monday night, March 12th, 7:40 p.m., the Board of Selectmen. Another reminder, the Day at the Races put on by the League of Women Voters will be this Sunday in the McCall Middle School auditorium. It will be from 2 to 4 p.m. The time period, and all of you should pay attention to this, the time period 2 to 2:30 is designed to be a period in which town meeting members who are campaigning for office, including those of you who may be challenging Mr. Howley in Precinct 3, it's a time for you to gather in the McCall lobby and talk to your fellow members of the community in the town. You know, Tom's a nice guy, sure, but he's been around for a while. If you need tips, let me know. But Day at the Races this Sunday, 2 to 4:30, the McCall Middle School. Ms. Lannon has asked that I remind all of you that the town election will be on March 27th at all of the usual polling places, and we would appreciate your attendance and votes, March 27th. So this brings us to the preliminary motions relevant to this special town meeting, and accordingly it's moved and seconded that the following preliminary motions be voted as: one, that Richard Howard, Town Manager, Stacy Ward, Comptroller, Mina McCory as Town Council, Mark Toogood, Assistant Town Manager, who are not town meeting members, be permitted to sit at the front of the auditorium with the Board of Selectmen during all sessions of this town meeting. further, that Judith Evans, the superintendent of schools, be permitted to sit at the front of the auditorium during all sessions of this special town meeting. That all members of the Finance Committee and their secretary, whether town meeting members or not, be permitted to sit together at the front of the auditorium during all sessions of this special town meeting. That the town clerk or her designee or assistant town clerk be permitted to occupy a desk on the platform during all sessions of this special town meeting. That the moderator be authorized to permit members of various town boards, commissions, committees, department heads, and petitioners of special articles to sit at the front of the auditorium during consideration of appropriate articles. That unless it be otherwise ordered, all adjourned sessions of this town meeting shall be held on successive Monday and Thursday evenings at 7:30 p.m. in the Winchester High School auditorium until the work of this special town meeting is completed. That action on all motions involving appropriations shall be contingent upon compliance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21C, a law known as the 2.5 tax limitation. The cable television coverage shall be permitted in all sessions of this special town meeting. The motions having been made and seconded, all those in favor? Any opposed? The motion's passed. This brings us to Article 1. Article 1 will require a 2/3 vote, and so that we don't need to waste time later on in this, let me appoint some tellers. Mr. Johnson, if you could count your section and the Board of Selectmen. Ms. Welch, if you could count your section through Mr. Jarius, I guess. Mr. McIntosh, would you mind assisting me in counting your section, and Ms. Wilson, if you could count your section and the Finance Committee, I would appreciate it if the tellers who I've just designated could please rise. Do you swear to provide this town meeting with an accurate count of the votes as recorded and report them to the chair? Thank you very much. So, Article 1. Under Article 1, brought by the Board of Selectmen School Committee and the Educational Facilities Planning and Building Committee, it's moved and seconded that the town hereby appropriate the sum of $10,700,000 to be expended under the direction of the School Committee and the Educational Facilities Planning and Building Committee, EFPBC, for architectural design services and for the construction of the McCall Middle School expansion project, including upgrading of building management and telephone systems, renovation of existing spaces, expansion of the cafeteria, and the construction of a 4-story addition, which includes general education classrooms, specialist workspaces, public toilets, and other supplemental building, including all costs incidental or related thereto, as outlined in the February 2018 plans prepared by Flansburgh Architects, and for a traffic study and any associated improvements recommended therein, including but not limited to signalization, traffic calming, and signage, including all costs incidental or related thereto, that to meet this appropriation, the Treasurer, with approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow $10,700,000 under Chapter 44 of the General Laws or any other enabling authority, that any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the General Laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount, that the School Committee and the EFPBC are authorized to have joint oversight of said school expansion project, and that the Town Manager is authorized to have oversight on the traffic improvement project, and that in accordance with Section 4-2 of the Winchester Home Rule Charter, the Town Manager will have the authority to enter into contracts and approve payments with respect to said project, provided, however, that this vote shall not take effect until the town votes to exempt from the limitation on total taxes imposed by General Law, Chapter 59, Section 21C, Proposition 2.5, amounts required to pay the principal of and interest on the borrowing authorized by this vote. In support of the motion under Article 1, Mr. Nixon, the Vice Chairman of the Winchester School Committee. Mr. Nixon.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Everyone hear me okay? No? I'm going to work this a little bit, Jordan. How about that? We hear me a little bit better? Mr. Moderator, guests, town meeting members, and staff, under Article 1 this evening, the School Committee, Board, and EFPBC asked to move forward with Phase 2 of the McCall Middle School expansion project, identified as a top priority in our district's 2017 Facilities Master Plan due to an immediate need for more space for its growing student enrollment. Tonight, in a way, is a follow-up to last fall's town meeting when, under Article 32, you supported the completion of design documents and construction for Phase 1 of the McCall expansion project, as well as our request for schematic design of Phase 2, with the understanding that we would come back to you this spring, tonight, with a better definition of scope, program location, and cost to back up a request for design completion and construction to finish this much-needed project. Before I get to the details of the expansion project, please indulge me as I take a moment to highlight that need behind it. Developed from 2016 through 17 by Boston firm Flansburgh Architects, the Winchester Public Schools Facilities Master Plan is our vision for the support, expansion, consolidation, or transformation of our district facilities that provides flexibility to accommodate changes in enrollment, educational goals, and programming. Developed, pardon me. With this alignment, our master plan plans for the growth and the best use of our facilities and properties with preliminary cost, phasing, and schedule options. The master plan can assist in the procurement of funds, whether as a reference point for capital planning committee, vetting our small to medium projects, or the MSBA in consideration of the district's statements of interest and potential state reimbursement on our larger projects. But a master plan does not include the detailed design of new buildings or additions, nor the specific financial plan for implementation. In 2007, ours was a district of just under 4,000 students. By last year, we'd seen over 17% growth in our pre-K through 12 population, and that's over a period when statewide enrollment continued to fall. By last year, we were nearly double the size of the average Massachusetts school district. Over the coming decade, our new facilities master plan projects continued growth of 16%, very similar to the previous period. While this rate of growth is certainly familiar to us, it represents a sustained double-digit phenomenon that sets us apart from most other districts in the Commonwealth. Based on recommendations of the board and management, last summer the school committee sought an independent expert third-party review and second opinion of the 2017 enrollment forecast in the master plan. The UMass Donahue Institute for Economic and Public Policy Research reviewed the enrollment projections in light of regional population growth, job sector growth, personal wage growth, and trends in transportation, housing demand, and availability. The Donahue Institute found school enrollment in Winchester is expanding in response to the underlying dynamics of population and job growth in Massachusetts and the greater Boston area. The Commonwealth has become the fastest growing state in the Northeast, and the growth spurt is focused in Boston and its metropolitan region. With a population growth rate above 6%, Winchester is growing at a faster pace than either Massachusetts or the United States. Most Winchester workers commute out of town every morning. Jobs growth in the places where Winchester residents work has been increasing faster than the national average and in other parts of Massachusetts since the end of the Great Recession. Nearby job opportunities in finance, technology, and healthcare, with commuting distance from Winchester convenient, are adding to the growth of the town and appeal for many. The Donahue Institute also looked at Winchester residential development trends, including teardowns converted to duplexes or to larger multi-bedroom homes, as well as active 40B multi-unit projects, and they found the town's development pipeline further supports a scenario of sustained future growth. In sum, the UMass team's second opinion found the master plan's enrollment projections to be on track. So, now to McCall. The middle school's share of this substantial growth is projected to be 175 students by year 10. However, the vast majority of the growth is expected by years 4 through 5, or 2020 through 2021. Taking into account today's shortfall of 2 instructional spaces, this growth drives a need for 8 additional classrooms, a key component of the McCall expansion project, itself a 2-phase renovation and expansion of the middle school that provides new classrooms, expanded cafeteria, faculty work areas, expanded athletic facilities, and additional public restrooms for our students and visitors at Manchester Field. Phase 1, the initial smaller scale renovation remodeling project you approved last fall, will provide 3 new classrooms through renovation of approximately 4,800 square feet of existing space located under the gymnasium. Construction documents for Phase 1 are complete, and preparations are underway for construction to begin late this spring and to be complete by September 18 for the start of school. Phase 1 addresses the existing space shortage at McCall, as the library is currently subdivided into 2 instructional spaces. With the 3rd new classroom taken by 2019, Phase 2 is needed to address further enrollment growth as projected by the master plan. Phase 2 of the McCall expansion project has taken a very different architectural shape from what was originally envisioned. While the remodeling of a teacher workroom and cafeteria expansion are consistent with the specific recommendations of the master plan, the working group explored other options for the multi-story classroom addition. Originally imagined attached to the library wing, the addition has been relocated as an extension of the E-wing and includes the programmed athletic space at the basement level. This shift in location consolidates major excavation and foundation activity from 2 areas to 1. It co-locates the multi-story addition and team rooms with the required cafeteria expansion. It eliminates impact on school dismissal, bus drop-off, and pickup, given that the bus loop is adjacent to the library wing. It leaves unaltered the architectural massing and historically sensitive exterior detailing of the library wing, and it permits construction of athletic team rooms without eliminating existing storage space. Working our way up this 4-story project from bottom to top, let's start with the lowest or basement level, which is accessible from Manchester Field. Here the project calls for 2 athletic team rooms with dedicated bathrooms, a trainer's room, and new public toilets of 4 fixtures each, as well as mechanical and storage space. At the lower right, you'll see the new teacher workroom. This element is not new construction, but a remodeling of that existing storage space that once served as a typing classroom in the 1970s. Moving up to the ground floor, we find the existing cafeteria, which must be expanded in compliance with the Life Safety Code. 2 new classrooms are provided at this level, 1 for general education and 1 science, along with a cafeteria expansion that bridges the gap, so to speak. This new cafeteria space includes new furniture, movable partitions for smaller assembly uses, including professional development, and finally an added servery for our increased student population. Up on the first floor, which is the entrance level from Main Street, the project calls for another 2 classrooms in the same configuration as the ground floor below. Skylights at this level will be provided to maximize daylighting in the cafeteria below, and clear-story windows along the corridor extension similarly bring natural light into the building. Finally, we come to the 4th level of the project, where the 3rd pair of classrooms are located in the same configuration as the floors below. Key design principles for Phase 2 addition have governed its exterior development. Similar masonry materials compatible with the library and E-wing, simplicity in form and detailing, so no upstaging of the library wing, maintaining pedestrian flows with an arcade similar to the E-wing circulation today, maintaining the scale and elevation of window openings with adjacent buildings. We also look to ensure daylighting into corridors and stairs in addition to the classrooms themselves. Working with the school department and DPW, the design team identified building system upgrades that are needed now and which would be much more expensive to address after project completion. The working group and the architecture team vetted these elements and supports their inclusion in the project along with the EFPBC. First, a Cat6 phone system upgrade with new handsets. Much of McCall's existing building-wide phone system is a failing patchwork of twisted pair Cat3 and Cat5 cables with outdated hardware that is unreliable. Rather than patch another subsystem for Phase 2 spaces into the existing network, the project includes a recabling of the building and new phones, similar to those installed at the VO school and at the Winchester High School. The cost for this is estimated at $145,000. Second, a building management system upgrade ensures efficient operation of McCall's HVAC systems, allowing Phases 1, 2, and the existing E-wing to be managed by DPW remotely in a manner similar to the Vincent Owens School and Winchester High School. And this cost is estimated at $100,000.
Excuse me, Mr. Nixon. The speaker's original time of 10 minutes has expired. It's moved and seconded. The speaker's time be expended by 5 minutes. All those in favor? Any opposed? Mr. Nixon, thank you.
Thank you. Out of concern for existing traffic challenges at McCall and understanding that rising enrollment brings more student and car volume, the board has included in the funding request for Phase 2 an allowance of $500,000 to support a traffic consultant in the implementation of recommendations. These may include signage, curbing, roadway striping, and signalization, pedestrian crosswalks and bicycle accommodations, among others. Given the specialized nature of the work, it is envisioned that this would be bid separately from the Phase 2 building project, but with adequate time to be complete by September of 2020. So costs. Construction cost is primarily the cost of hiring a contractor, including materials, labor, general conditions, and the contractor's overhead and profit. As you may recall from Fall Town Meeting, the remodeling of that 1970s typing classroom into a teacher workroom was pulled out of the Phase 1 scope and is now included in Phase 2. The cost of this work is approximately $105,000. With this component now included, the construction cost for Phase 2 of the McCall expansion project is now estimated at $7,275,000 and change, or approximately $545 per square foot. But construction costs do not include all the items and expenses needed to build a project. Contingencies for unforeseen issues, architecture and engineering fees, owner-provided items such as furniture, fixtures, and equipment, testing and inspectional services, builder's risk insurance, and project management costs are carried in the project cost of approximately $10.2 million. Let's take a look at these numbers in a little greater detail. In this summary accounting, we'll start with the construction cost of the elements identified in the master plan and add the cost of the building management system and telephone system upgrades. For this project, the working group, school committee, and EFPBC support a construction contingency of over $745,000 and an owner's contingency of approximately $340,000. The design team's fee to complete construction documents and see the project through completion is estimated at $875,000 at this time. Our costs for furniture in the classrooms and cafeteria expansion, as well as technology and instructional spaces, is budgeted at $112,000. Additional consulting costs, testing and management fees, and builder's risk insurance bring a project cost of $10.2 million for Phase 2. The $500,000 allowance for traffic and safety measures then brings the total appropriation request to $10.7 million. Thanks to your support last fall, Phase 1 construction is slated to begin late this spring and be complete by the start of school in September. Although the need for Phase 2 is more than 2 years out, the nature of the work requires a lengthy 10 months of design. This will accommodate bidding early next spring and construction start once school is out for the summer of 19. This detailed design work for Phase 2 must begin if we are to stay ahead of the next wave of enrollment growth. To close my presentation this evening, I went looking over the weekend for images of the last major expansion at McCall. That was the E-Wing in 2009. And in my digital search, I found a photograph and a caption from the October 18th issue of the Winchester Star that I had actually long forgotten. One gray Sunday, my kids, then 8 and 5 years old at the time, were eager to come down to the E-Wing open house and to imagine what it would be like to be middle schoolers one day. For me, as you can imagine, that seemed far in the distant future. As a parent not yet on the school committee, I was struck by and thankful for a town that saw fit to invest in the addition while much larger projects were looming in the 2007 master plan, including the reconstruction of VO and the Winchester High School. While it may seem to many of us that the E-Wing was built yesterday, it wasn't. These kids have grown up. The second grader is now a junior here at Winchester High School. The preschooler is finishing 7th grade at McCall, and that building has served them very well. I could not have imagined then that I would be here standing before you tonight asking for your support for another expansion at McCall. But it has been a decade since the E-Wing design was completed, and if supported, Phase 2 will open some 11 years after the open house many of us attended years ago. As I noted in my opening remarks, the past decade has brought record double-digit enrollment growth. Our current master plan, approved just this past July, projects this growth continues, and the Donahue Institute concurs. On behalf of the school committee, co-sponsors, and administration, I hope we can count on your support to provide students in our growing district with the quality instructional and support spaces they expect and deserve. For those who may have missed the announcement, we have established a website for the McCall expansion project. Please visit tinyurl.com/McCall expansion project for more detail on the information presented. Mr. Moderator, my colleagues and I will be taking note of town meeting questions this evening. We hope to post a summary of our debate to the project website in the coming days, well in advance of the ballot question that comes on Tuesday, March 27th. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nixon. Well done. Could have closed with an updated photo of Jack and Kate, but I know you can't control everything.
They're on the hot.
May we have a recommendation from the Finance Committee? Ms. Allison.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. The Finance Committee voted favorable action. The vote tally was 12 in favor and 1 opposed. The Finance Committee has repeatedly met with various representatives of the school committee and Dr. Evans regarding McCall's expansion. FinCom also has representation on the Master Plan Review Committee, the McCall Expansion Working Group, and EFPBC to be involved in the design and cost discussions. Our decision was influenced by the following factors. First, the reality of the rising enrollment and projection of the continued rise in enrollment as highlighted by both the master plan and confirmed by the separate third-party study by the Donahue Institute, and as you saw from Mr. Nixon's presentation. Second, the current enrollment and space constraints at McCall, which include using the library for classrooms, a cafeteria which does not meet life safety code, lack of athletic facilities to accommodate the growing participation, etc. And finally, the expected cost to address these issues if this article and override do not pass. Historically, we have experienced high costs associated with the use of modular classrooms, which would be required to accommodate the rise in enrollment at McCall. Use of modular classrooms, which are temporary structures, I feel compelled to remind everybody, is very costly. 6 classrooms means $6 to $7 million in costs, and that assumes that we can find a place to put them. That option was considered and rejected during the master planning discussions, and inevitably, if we did decide to go that route, they would probably end up in the back parking lot and in the fields. That $6 to $7 million will not address the cafeteria issues or the other infrastructure improvements that we gain in this current expansion proposal. So Finance Committee supports this plan to proactively address the current needs at McCall. We are cognizant of the broader issues facing the town, including extensive needs at Lynch and Morocco. These are just 2 of several significant challenges. To that point, we've asked the Board of Selectmen to address the longer-term budgeting needs of the town with a 5 to 10-year budget view. We are meeting with them to continue those discussions to provide visibility to spending needs and timelines and expect to provide an update at Springtown meeting. As a town, we're in a tough spot, and there is not an ideal solution that addresses all of the school needs with one project. The McCall expansion override provides us with an opportunity to be proactive, to add on space in the best location available, and to manage the costs around that as tightly as we can while we pursue the best options for the other project needs of the town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a recommendation from the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Betancourt, on behalf of the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on Article 1 by a vote of 5 to 0. I want to thank members of the school committee, Superintendent Evans, the town manager, the EFPBC, and the Finance Committee, and members of the project working group who worked so hard over the past several months to put together a cost-effective plan to address our overcrowding issues at McCall. Thank you. At this point, we are all well aware of the overcrowding issues in our schools due to the spike in enrollment over the past several years. Certainly, every community deals with enrollment changes organically over a period of time, but what is unique to Winchester is the sustained growth that we have experienced and will continue to see over the next decade. The school committee's master plan responds well to this growth, and the McCall expansion project is one of the most urgent recommendations of that plan. In order to confirm this sustained growth, the Board of Selectmen requests an additional study to evaluate the enrollment projections presented by Flansburgh. As Chris mentioned, the UMass Donahue study confirmed those projections and assured us that this project was necessary. Over the past few years, the school committee has worked hard to adjust class schedules, partition library space, and convert every teacher room and storage closet to use for educating these students. And the only thing that we know for certain is that we are out of room and there are more kids coming. Believe me, my daughter, Violet, is in the 3rd grade at Vincent Owen, and she's in the class where there's supposed to be an enrollment decrease when we looked at the numbers years ago. And there are kids everywhere. They're cute, but there are hundreds of them everywhere when I go over to VA, thousands maybe. There are a lot of kids, and they're here, and we need to provide space for them. But at this juncture, it's important that after each substantial school construction project, we look back and evaluate the project and learn for the next time. The VO construction project was very successful and came in on time and under budget. But what we didn't account for at the time was the traffic and transportation impact of a school with more kids coming from further away. We had to add extra buses and crossing guards and identified drop-off locations for kids to walk to school safely. This meant repairing sidewalks and adding safety infrastructure. This added significant cost to a project that could not be bonded out of the school construction project. It had to come directly from our already lean operating budget to the tune of over $500,000, which did not include traffic signalization cost of nearly $1.5 million, or another $30,000 in rapid flashing beacons. Because of the safety concerns, town meeting granted us the money for a temporary light at Johnson Ridge, which is nearly complete. In consideration of this unanticipated budget impact, the Board of Selectmen adopted a policy to fund safety infrastructure in conjunction with school construction projects due to enrollment increases. The McCall expansion is the first project to be subject to this policy, and we have included $500,000 for potential safety infrastructure costs and a traffic study. Over the past few years alone, nearly 40 accidents have been logged to Lincoln and McCall. One student was hit in a crosswalk on Mystic Valley Parkway, one on Church Street. And we're all familiar with the intersection in front of McCall. It is constant chaos, and it's an accident waiting to happen. This is the perfect opportunity to resolve some of these known risks as the enrollment continues to rise. Finally, I want to especially acknowledge the fine work of Chris Nixon on this project. Winchester is a town that relies on a high level of skill and dedication of volunteers like Chris, and we often don't take the opportunity to recognize our leaders. Chris's work on this project has been exceptional, and I want to say thank you to Chris in particular. Thank you, Chris. So please vote favorable action on Article 1, and please also encourage other residents who are not here tonight to do the same on March 27th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Betancourt. May we have a recommendation from the Planning Board? Ms. Welch, Ms. Chairperson.
Good evening, town meeting. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. Just very briefly, the Planning Board recommends favorable action on Article 1. The Planning Board has a few comments just to point out. The Planning Board's decision does not address the financial aspects of the article. And number two, the Planning Board looks forward to reviewing and contributing to the preliminary design and the plans of the site as soon as possible. And finally, the Planning Board points out that the McCall Middle School is a contributing resource in the Winchester Center Historic District as listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It's obviously a beautiful building that everyone in town cherishes. Thank you again, Mr. Nixon, for all your hard work. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. Before we begin our debate, I'm remiss in not making one note that I wanted to mention before we started, which is that we are this evening graced, as we so often are, and have the benefit of our state legislatures, Michael Day and Jason Lewis, who are kind enough to join us this evening. So please express your appreciation to them. So further on the question, I'm advised we do not have handheld microphones this evening. So if you would like to speak, please come to the aisle on either end of the microphones or the podium at the front of the auditorium. Further on the question. Yes. Yeah. Oh. Mr. Conti, I was calling on the woman behind you, but I apologize, Tony. I'll call on you next.
My mic is on.
There you go.
There we go. Answer of Precinct 1. I'm wondering if the building permits will be obtained by the time that we have preliminary flood maps out. Because it's possible, even with our new flood designation, our flood work that we just completed, it's possible that the floodplain could expand. In that case, we would need a lot more money to develop this property. So I'm wondering if somebody can get an idea of that timeline.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Deering, Mr. Nixon, anybody else who can speak with some authority to the floodplain maps and their connection to this project. Mr. Nixon.
Perhaps just a question back to Ms. Sarah so that we understand the question. So are you referring to the updated FEMA maps that we understand will come once flood mitigation is complete? Thank you. So there are 2 more projects that remain to be completed. Project 8, which is the Swanton Street Bridge, which is, I understand, not correct? Sorry, Mr. Moderator.
Speaking through the moderator,
Thank you, Ms. Sarah.
I'll ask the moderator to relay to Mr. Nixon that there are flood maps that come out approximately every 10 years, and around the 8-year mark, which we are on now, there are a set of preliminary flood maps that come out, which are then, and that preliminary flood maps are usually the basis for how designs go forward from that point onward. So if those preliminary flood maps show that this property, that the floodplain has expanded, and the floodplain is so close to the proposed border of the, to your proposed new border of that expansion of the wing, it's really possible that these new floodplains, which are coming out, I think, imminently, could pose a lot more money to the project.
So, Mr. Moderator, I understand
Yes.
the question a little better. So I guess just a couple of thoughts. We do have 2 more projects yet to go in our 17, 18 years as we pick away at flood mitigation, with the understanding that with each project completed, we further reduce the area of floodplains and floodways in town, separate and apart from any regular sort of republishing of maps that Ms. Sarah refers to. The whole intention behind that, of course, is we see more and more properties come out of the 100-year floodplain and out of the floodway. I suppose the best I can do, Ms. Sarah, is to describe to you that when we went through the master plan process, we did look at floodways and floodplains for all of the proposed projects. The adjacency, as it was originally proposed off the library wing, I think was actually closer to that line than it is today. Maybe another benefit I hadn't thought of until you asked the question. But we did look at it carefully, for instance, at Morocco, where we're right up against it, and that's another major flood mitigation project. All I suppose I can do, and I look to my right towards if anyone from management wants to chime in on this, maybe Mr. Toogood, who sits with us so often at the capital planning table, but my understanding is with all the flood mitigation work, I would expect those lines to recede, if you will, move away from the project site rather than encroach. The best I can tell you is we looked at it at the master planning level with Flansburgh as we came up with the design.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Mr. Conti, further on the question.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, fellow town meeting members. The only alternative that was indicated by the school committee was the possibility of temporary classrooms. And it strikes me, obviously, that's not a good solution, but we haven't heard about any other alternatives that could accommodate this increase of 175 students that's projected. For example, increasing class size, spreading kids out among the existing classrooms, and I know we're going to be having, in the first phase, there are going to be 3 new additional classrooms, which will accommodate some students, and possibly even having a 7th grade in the elementary schools, adding a grade in spreading them out among elementary schools as an alternative to instead of spending almost $11 million to accommodate 175 additional students. What I'm concerned about, frankly, is that we all know we've just begun to feel the effects of the cost of building this magnificent structure that we're in tonight. I'm concerned that we're driving out older residents who don't have kids in school right now, and as a consequence, we're going to be picking up younger families with bringing more kids into the system because of our constantly rising tax bill at these projects. And this is only the beginning. As was indicated, we have plans for Morocco and Lynch as well coming down the line, which are going to, I'm sure, be substantially even more expensive, thereby resulting in an even greater impact on the tax bills of our senior citizens who are going to be faced with the option of having to pay those increased costs driving people out of town. And you know, it can't go on forever. You know, we have to look at other alternatives, and I'd like to hear from the school department about what other alternatives they've considered. And I'd also like to hear about what measures they're taking to ensure that only Winchester residents are attending our schools. We know we have a very attractive school system. Yeah, oh my God, I'm sorry.
Hey, town meeting will be in order. Proceed, Mr. Conti.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the school committee members as to exactly what they're doing to provide us with other alternatives.
Thank you, Mr. Conti. In response to Mr. Conti's question as to other alternatives besides modular classrooms, Mr. Nixon.
So, Mr. Moderator, this will be a tag team approach. I'd want to address a couple of things Mr. Conti raised, and if I can, throw it to Dr. Evans, our
Certainly.
superintendent. And first, as Mr. Conti was speaking, it reminded me of another point I wanted to make in the presentation. I did not, and I apologize for that. I believe the bonding tables that management have run looking at a 20 or 25-year bond put the cost of this project at approximately $100 for the median family home. Is that approximately right, Mr. Motter? Ballpark is all I'm looking for.
Yeah, we'll let Mr. Howard speak to the tax figures when you've concluded your remarks. Mr.
I
Nixon.
simply just wanted to raise it as Mr. Conti was speaking. It is important, and I think this is our practice, frankly, at town meeting when we contemplate major capital projects, to be clear about what the cost is. And so I apologize for not mentioning that. That is, for some, not a significant figure, and for others, it really is a significant figure, and I'm very mindful of that. A couple of thoughts. So with respect to other alternatives, what if we moved 7th grade to Lincoln School? That actually is something we looked at the master plan, got very excited about, and it would actually make us, I believe, the only community in the Commonwealth with a secondary education campus downtown, which could be really fantastic. The problem is, where do you put the Lincoln School kids? And so in the context of looking at the rebuilding of Lynch, looking at Morocco, one of the options that came up was an elementary school for 1,450 kids. So that brings with it all sorts of concerns around site and cost. But what I will say is that if the enrollment, and I think we've acknowledged this in past meetings, if this enrollment trend continues well past the coming decade, the answer at McCall is not going to be one addition after another after another. We've acknowledged we're going to have to really rethink how we structure our middle school, where our kids go, and that would certainly necessitate rethinking this idea of a 6th grade academy. I would like to throw it to Dr. Evans, Mr. Moderator, to speak to some of the other questions from Mr. Conti.
Certainly. Dr. Evans.
Thank you. I think it's an excellent question to ask about whether we're using current space efficiently and effectively. Can we fit more students in the existing space and better use the facility without adding additional classrooms? One of the things that we looked at when we did the master plan, and what the MSBA looks at, is what is the square footage per student in each building? And in fact, McCall is our most crowded building with the least amount of square feet per student. The classrooms are actually slightly undersized by MSBA standards, and the average class size at McCall is our largest class size in the district. So while it's possible to accommodate 1 or 2 more students per class, I think that the overall grade level classes are approaching 400 students, and at that point you need to add additional core classroom facilities. The other thing we're coming up against that we haven't talked about much is, what does our program look like? What do we want our students to experience when they're in our middle school? What will we be offering them in terms of extracurriculars, in terms of elective programs? And right now we have a very bare bones program because we don't have space to expand it. And so adding additional space will allow us to add additional offerings, perhaps some STEM electives, some fine and performing arts expansion, and relocate some of the existing programs into some of the new classrooms and use the spaces more efficiently. So I think it's a valid question to ask whether we're using our space effectively. And I would say, I would invite everyone to come to McCall if you haven't been there. We'll have a tour on Sunday, the 18th of March, 2 o'clock. Come on down if you haven't been there, check out the site. Every square inch is used, I think, pretty effectively. Many spaces are used that weren't intended for the spaces for instructional purposes. There isn't a single teacher workspace, lunchroom, planning space, copy center. And so the addition of 1 room in this phase 2 will really help the teachers at McCall, who do such a fantastic job with our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Further on the question? Yes, Ms. Pryor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Michelle Pryor, Precinct 4. I have some questions for school committee, for select board, and some estimates of operating costs, which were not addressed in the school committee's presentation or FinCom's recommendation. So this first page is what Chris Nixon went over. I just want to point out on the next slide, if I can forward that. So this is on page 8 of the master plan. This is the projected enrollment growth from Flansburgh. It is average class sizes are 24 at the middle school, as Dr. Evans just said. The new classrooms on the far right, straight math, take the new students, divide by the number of students per class. The 147 at McCall is actually 6.1 classrooms, but we're trying to, the report says we need 7. Fair enough, some good rounding. The high school needs 9 new classrooms. In looking at the sources of that growth, 38% of that growth is what we would experience now with census, birth rates, teardowns, conversions, and additions. 62% is if all the new development comes online by 2021 or 2022. So nearly 2/3 is speculative growth, not suggesting Cambridge Street won't get developed, but this is a perfect storm of everything happening in 4 years. And if that growth doesn't happen, we need 2 new classrooms, not 7. I also read through the master plan because there was some rain last weekend, so I had some time. Parkhurst is a building of 14 classrooms for 20 people. If we think about a 6th grade academy, 14 classrooms would accommodate 3.5 middle school teams. Perhaps that'll be one of my final questions, but significantly, if we look at 7th grade at the Lincoln School, why are we not looking at an existing building that is in operation that would hold 14 classrooms, understanding 2 of them modular? Another note from the master plan, the Parkhurst School was a temporary move in 2013, but that a permanent solution needs to be found. It could be co-located at a new Lynch, at a new Morocco, or at the Carriage House. The underlines are mine, by the way. The Carriage House is only slightly more than including the space at one of the new schools. It's $3 million. Let me say a couple things about that. The school budget does not pay for energy, maintenance, plowing, custodial services. That's the town's budget. So a $3 million office for 20 people would be paid and heated by the town side. So the school budget that we often say is underfunded would not even absorb the costs of bringing another building online. And if we need to use the Parkhurst for a 6th grade academy, where would the central office go? So I did some math, and if you looked at office space in Winchester, of which there is not significant space of significant size, but if 20 people needed approximately 6,500 to 8,000 square feet, you could pay either $10,000 or $15,000 a month in rent, and you could rent space for anywhere between 17 and 25 years before you would spend $3 million. And that does not include energy. So I think if a future town meeting looks at the Carriage House as an option, we need to be very mindful of the fact that rent is a lot cheaper, or certainly it's 17 years worth, is what $3 million would get you. If we relocated, Parkhurst could be used as swing space as we build a new Lynch or a new McCall. It could be used as a school in case enrollment increases, which is what Chris Nixon said. Broad terms, we may need to bring it back online, but I don't know that the solution is to put the Carriage House as a $3 million office. Again, last piece on the central office Carriage House, while Morocco and Lynch could be built with a wing for administration, all of the schedules in the master plan did not show anything for Parkhurst other than the Carriage House. So I wonder what actual consideration has been given to co-locating in a building where you heat it and light it and cool it once as a wing of an existing building or a new building. So the next piece is operating costs. So it's not just if you build it, but if you build it, they will come. I asked about teachers. The superintendent got back to me very graciously. We don't know yet. Student needs will be different. Might be specialist spaces, might be co-teaching. Completely agree. I did some estimates though and figured 6 classrooms get 6 teachers, 2 paraprofessionals, and DPW graciously gave us a cost for the custodian. I took the base salary in 2017, increased it by 2% to get to a 2022 salary, Increase that by fringe at 33%. So the ongoing cost of new teachers, only 6, that's not if we have co-teachers or multiple paraprofessionals, is $500,000 in annual ongoing costs. Paraprofessionals, another $100,000, custodians, $53,000. Ms. Radicchio is very gracious to share the food services worker costs, a new line of servers at the new expanded cafeteria, $65,000. That's not in the school's budget, it would be in the food services contract. That was a blend of 4 food service workers working between 2 and 8 hours a day. I didn't just take the 4 highest priced people that serve food in the middle school. So about $628,000 in salary costs, $17,000 in known energy costs, a big unknown in terms of cooling. The response back from Ms. Radicchio is that we're getting a new HVAC system to cool the new phase 1 and phase 2. We don't know the cost of the acquisition or the operation of that. So that's about $700,000 in ongoing operating costs. Now, if the students don't come, if all of those developments don't happen, and we have 6 new classrooms that cost about $1 million apiece, what are we going to do with them? Well, central office could move in, but that's not likely. We will expand programs. If we build it, we will use it. We will have new teachers doing foreign language or program expansion, and I'm not suggesting that that's bad. But if the selling point is the kids are coming, we're busting at the seams, let's be honest, if the kids don't show up, we're still going to have additional teachers, and we're still going to pay additional dollars in the operating budget. So just as we think about it, $10 million is a one-time cost, $600,000 to $700,000 is an ongoing cost. That's direct to the bottom line of the budget. It's potentially the justification for an operating override. There's a lot more riding at stake than just this one-time debt exclusion. The last questions, if the moderator will indulge me, 4 questions.
I was just going to tell you that your time expired, but go ahead with your questions.
They're it. I have 2 questions for the select board and 2 questions for the school committee. And if I can ask 4, Mr. Moderator, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you very much.
All right.
So does the Board of Selectmen want to respond to the questions that Ms. Pryor has directed to them, the current status of the Holton Street et al. Developments, and the timeline for when those projects will be completed, the board or the town manager?
So the Cambridge Street project, which consists of about 96 units, it's received a permit from the local zoning board here. The neighbors abutting the project have appealed it into either Superior or Land Court. We, based upon the pace of some previous cases, would expect that some kind of decision from those courts would probably come down in sometime 2019. In theory, it's probably an appeal that the proponents could win, projecting that they would win and begin to build. It would probably be sometime in the 2021 early time frame that the building would come online and tenants would begin moving in. Holton Street is a project that we have talked to a potential development team about. Those discussions have gone off and on. They do not have currently an active deal to take down the property and move forward with their development. They, as a team, were proposing anywhere from 300 to 360 units of affordable housing, so-called Chapter 40B housing. So that one is not currently active. There's no intention that we know of to file a permit with Mass Housing or any of the other 40B agencies that approve those permits. And that process, if it were to be started in 2018, would probably take into 2019 before it would be approved. But it would be, for the land mass that's being talked about, probably be for 300 units at a minimum. The only other thing I would add, Mr. Moderator, on that point, that the board and the town has been subject to these 40B applications because of the level of subsidized housing that we have in the community. It remains very low in relation to the statewide mandate that you attempt to get 10% of affordable housing in all communities across the Commonwealth. So the expectation is that we will continue to see development proposals come in only because that index that we currently have, which is around 1.8%, is a long ways off from 10%. It gives the developers a real target to be able to shoot for if they can find the appropriate site in the town to be able to develop. So that'll be an ongoing thing that the town will struggle with. And I think the board's perspective is eventually many of those kinds of developments will be brought forward and probably successfully permitted and then inhabited with a level of families that have been estimated for at least this plan going forward. So, board can add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Mr. Betancourt, and further response to the questions directed to the board.
Thank you, Michelle, for those questions. One thing that I would add to Richard's comments are that the board has shifted its policy in regards to 40B. We have started a housing production plan process, which a lot of residents had asked us to do in the light of some of these really outsized 40B projects that were coming in. The Forest Ridge project was the one that really triggered the conversation for us. And what the production plan does is it allows us to get into a safe harbor where we would not be subject to those 40B projects who circumvent our zoning, and we would be able to better control what kind of housing comes into our community. The catch is that it's called housing production plan for a reason. We're going to be required to actually produce housing, 70 to 80 units per year. So where in the past we've taken a stance where we're going to litigate away 40B, we have shifted our policy in order to have better control over really what comes to Winchester. So at this point, we're in the housing production plan process, working with MAPC and a working group of residents. So where in the past, maybe we would say we don't know if these projects are coming, I think that we know that in some sense, we are going to be working with developers to do friendly 40B projects, bring more affordable housing to the town center. That was one of the goals of the rezoning of the CBD that we worked on a few years ago and that the planning board put forward. So I think more affordable housing is coming, and it should. We are at 1.8%. We are one of the lowest in the state, as Richard mentioned. So I think it's not so much an academic question in the sense that these units will be coming to our town soon, and it is the policy of the board that we will be working on that. So.
Thank you, Mr. Betancourt. Mr. Nixon, in response to the question, or Dr. Evans, if the McCall census is fully realized, consistent with your projections, what then with respect to the 9 additional classrooms at the high school?
So, Mr. Moderator, again, if I may do a twofer here with the superintendent, I just wanted to acknowledge a couple of statements from Ms. Pryor. To clarify, our numbers, our projections for enrollment do not assume that every development happens by year 4 or year 5. We surveyed and projected a number of developments in town from corner to corner. We assigned, if you will, some odds, for lack of a better term, towards the likelihood for development. We took some averages. We made some careful calculations in terms of likelihood for development in, let's say, the 5-year time frame or the 10-year time frame. And I think that was a thoughtful process. The 6 classrooms, or the 6.1, which a former FinCom chair would discover as a 0.1, so I appreciate that. I think that math is actually right. However, remember, we're short 2 classrooms in the library. So what we've been saying is we're short 2, we need 6 for growth, that's 8. And in fact, if you account for the 3 in phase 1 and the 6 in phase 2, that's 9. So for every person in town who tells me, I'm I'm not really sure all these kids are going to come. Are they really going to come? Maybe this is too much. There's another who tells me, why aren't we building more space? And maybe that's a signal that we've struck the right compromise. Clearly, I can look forward to a colorful and lengthy debate with Michelle over the carriage house, and I look forward to doing that. There's a lot of thought that went into that, and that time will come, I think, at the Springtown meeting, so Michelle will have to talk beforehand. With respect to the cost for the cafeteria, that added servery, I should also clarify, the costs for our Whitson's food service providers are actually borne by their contract, but with greater student enrollment, we have more kids buying lunch. We have more revenue. The revenue pays for the food service workers. Our former finance director, John Denizio, over a period of 3 or 4 years, was able to actually move those employees off of our operating budget, and so it's actually not our impression that we would see a hit to the operating budget associated with that line item. Now, if I would, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to let Dr. Evans address the question specifically.
Dr. Evans.
Thank you. Questions about additional staff members coming with additional space. If we have additional students, the staff members will need to come. They will be part of the ask each year for the operating budget to accommodate students. There is a perception that this big, beautiful new high school that we have is getting very full. We are retaining a far greater percentage of students than we have in the past. More students are moving into Winchester to attend middle and high school than were here the year before. And so students who may have gone to private school in the past are choosing to stay at Winchester High School or McCall Middle School. We're retaining a greater percentage of those students. So when the high school was built, there was a certain capacity that was judged to be sufficient. But within that plan, there's lots of flexible space within the school that can be converted to classroom space, some swing space that came about as part of the construction, some conference space that will naturally morph into small group learning space. And so we think we can accommodate an increase in students at the high school. The other thing about high school is that the high school campus is not a place like an elementary school. Students leave to go to work experiences or internships. We are using more blended learning. And so I think within 10 years, high schools will be more flexible spaces where students aren't here all day necessarily, not all students. If we look at using a 6th grade academy, it's great to see Superintendent Bodie of Arlington here. She's got a lot of experience with that, having just planned for a 6th grade academy. She's a Winchester resident town meeting member, and I hope that you'll take advantage of asking her fellow town meeting member questions about why Arlington was able to do that. The reality of Parkhurst School is that Parkhurst is not accessible. We need to install an elevator so we can even use the ground floor in the basement level. It is a very small school. When it was used as swing space for VO, it lacked some of the things that the other schools would have. If you have a middle school or a 6th grade academy, you need a library, you need a gym, you need a cafeteria, you need an art room, you need a music room. And so it's not like an elementary model where students stay in the same room except for one period a day where they might go to a special. And so making Parkhurst a 6th grade academy would essentially, you need to double the space and add a lot of modular classrooms to make that work, and it would be cost prohibitive. It's not really well set up for that. You can accommodate fewer than 300 students in an elementary model, and you need even more space for a secondary model. So I'm interested in making sure that Parkhurst becomes accessible, because I think we'll very quickly need to use it for elementary space. Lynch School is over capacity. If you've listened to Chris Nixon, all of our schools are at or over capacity in terms of the number of students we have at the elementary level. And if we have 3 or 4 more sections, we may have to use Parkhurst for an early childhood center or for a satellite location for one of our elementary schools within the next year or 2. So I'm very concerned about that. I'm very interested in moving central office out. I agree it's a large space for the number of people we have there. I'd like to have an appropriate space for our central office. If Richard could find space for us at Town Hall, I'd be happy to move in at Town Hall and share those digs. So thank you.
In further response to the town meeting questions, the chair of the school committee, Ms. Verdicchio. Ms. Verdicchio.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just want to make 2 quick points. As the school committee representative on the Housing Partnership Board, I'm aware that there's another multi-unit 40B. It's not very large, and it wasn't on our radar screen when we did the master plan, but I think it's located on Highland Avenue, and it's as presently proposed, it's like, I think, three-story buildings or something. So multi-unit development that has actually been gotten its preliminary approval from the state. The other thing I wanted to point out about space within McCall and all of our schools is that we work very hard to try to keep all of the as many special education students on individual education plans in district and going to school with their peers. First, selfishly, or maybe I shouldn't leave with the selfish reason, but from a financial standpoint, it's very costly for the district to pay out-of-district tuition and for transportation. And it's better for the students. All the research says that they learn better and just do better going to school with their peers rather than in these special placements. And those programs also take up space in our district schools. For example, at McCall, there are, I think, 3 specialized programs, and that's for 42 students. I don't even really know how much space that takes up. I think we should maybe talk about this a little bit more and kind of remove the sort of hush-hush approach we take to special education. I just wanted to point out that in all of the schools, the special education program does take up space, classroom space. It's not just, classrooms full of, 18 to 25 regular ed students and a teacher, that there's another space component as well.
Thank you, Ms. Verdicchio. Further question? Yes, Ms. Allison.
In response to Michelle's questions, I also wanted to offer, Finance Committee participated in the master plan review process, and we really challenged the team to think about how do we build schools that can last for 30 plus years. That if we're too short-sighted about our enrollment and educational needs, we're going to keep coming back to this group year after year after year, needing these piecemeal additions that accommodate just this little bit of growth now and don't plan ahead for the future. So it's a balance, right? You don't want to go too far that you have a bunch of big buildings that aren't used, but we also don't want to be nickel and diming this thing where it ends up costing us a lot more because we haven't been thoughtful about the space requirements. So I did want to offer that we really did push the team to think about that. That combined with the fact that we have 2 different groups driving these estimates that give us the same answer, that we are looking at this continued enrollment growth, is what made us feel that the addition was the right answer for McCall at this point in time.
Thank you, Ms. Allison. Further, Mr. Griffin, could you take that screen down for me and then further on the question? Yes, Mr. Jarius.
D. Abjarius, Precinct 8. I have a really quick question. Would this project be eligible for any state funds?
In response to the town meeting member's question, is the project eligible for state funding? Dr. Evans.
So one of the frustrating things about being in an affluent community like Winchester is that partnering with the MSBA is a long and difficult process, and the percentage reimbursement is really fairly low. But we diligently do pursue state funds when available. One of the things that we decided when we developed the master plan is that the intense need for space at McCall and the ability to control costs and keep them lower than they would be if we partnered with the state drove us to ask for your support for this from town funds. The process for asking for partnership with the state is long and arduous. We have submitted a statement of interest request to the state for renovation or replacement of both Morocco and Lynch schools. That was turned down. We will resubmit in April. I expect that will be turned down as well 10 months from now. The number of projects that get requested across the state are very high, and the pool of money from the state is very low. And so we purposefully decided, in order to get the space that we need at McCall, to move forward without asking for state partnership, because that would have pushed this project out 4 or 5 years and perhaps jeopardized getting one of the elementary schools handled in a timely fashion. The state will only partner with us on likely one project at a time and probably not in consecutive years. And so it was a determination after lots and lots of discussion that this was the most cost-effective and timely approach. The cost of building projects is escalating, as you might expect, and every year that we defer doing these projects adds to the cost. and ensures that our students are in spaces that are not appropriately sized for them. So that's the determination. I don't know if there's anything else I want to add to that. Great.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Further on the question? Yes, Ms. Welch.
This is just a real quick one. Some of us were collectively wondering if Mr. Howard was going to be able to follow up and give us an estimate on the annual tax bill for this expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. Mr. Howard.
We were hoping to dodge that one, but keep in mind that the final decisions on the bonds themselves have not been made. They won't be made until the time comes to actually do a final borrowing. But on the estimations that we've given to our financial advisor, we can kind of estimate, we think with pretty good accuracy, the following. If the board would authorize a 25-year borrowing on the 10 point, on about $11 million actually, so you can reduce this a little bit. The estimated payment on level debt over the 25 years would be $10.58 on every $100,000 of home valuation. So just doing some quick arithmetic, I know you're all ahead of me already, but on a $1 million home, $105. If the board were to choose to pay off the debt sooner by issuing a 20-year bond, same set of scenarios, and by the way, is about a 5%, 4.5% interest rate estimated on this one, a 5% interest rate estimated on the 25-year. It would, same kind of level debt kind of payment over 20 years on $100,000. The estimated impact is $11.46. So $114 on 11 million. So discount that a little bit by assuming we're going to be right, about 10.7 being the amount, a little bit lower than that on the average $100 million home, which is about average, by the way.
Thank you very much. Mr. Howard, further on the question. Are you ready? Yes, sir. The town meeting member's question is for the Finance Committee, how the operating cost increase referenced by Ms. Pryor will be dealt with and incorporated into the budgets going forward. Ms. Allison.
Thank you. I think Dr. Evans addressed some of that in that the enrollment numbers drive how much, if any, addition of staffing is required. It's a similar process that we follow now as we look at, even as we're starting to look at fiscal year 19, we're talking about where we are with enrollment, what the projections are for next year, what, if any, incremental staffing is required. The school committee and Dr. Evans look at sort of all of the positions and the options of how they can flex those to minimize the number of incremental staff that are required. So it would follow the same process that we do today of can we, what options do we have? Where do we see that we absolutely have to increase those numbers, and what does that look like? I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it's a very similar process that we have now.
Thank you. Ms. Allison, further on the question. So this is a 2/3 vote. This is a vote subject to a 2.5 vote by the electorate. So what you would be doing tonight would be authorizing the ballot question to proceed to the town voters, and this appropriation would not go forward unless the town voters voted to raise their taxes in accordance with the Proposition 2.5 limitation. It's a 2/3 vote, so all those in favor, please rise, and the tellers will count. Twenty-seven. 33? 39? Because both you and Ms. Wilson counted the Finance Committee. All right.
Why not?
So Mr. McIntosh's count, as much as the Finance Committee would like their vote to be counted double, Mr. McIntosh's count was not 39, it was 34. And Mr. Johnson?
34.
What?
34.
34. Yes. Okay. Mr. Johnson, there's some town meeting members who aren't seated in front of the place, but Senator Lewis, who we recognize as a member of the town meeting, and others.
I counted.
So you did count it? Okay.
There are more in the audience.
Mr. Johnson, if you could just indulge us and recount your section. And if the people who are members of the town meeting, please step forward so that we don't have any ambiguity about your membership here.
$45.
45.
Town employees.
All those opposed, please rise. One. 0.
0.
0. 1. 141 members of the town meeting having voted, 94 votes needed in the affirmative, 139 votes having been cast in the affirmative. The motion passes. Thank you very much. The chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. All in favor? Thanks for coming out tonight. On.